WarGames plays like the cleanest mistake in the world. A smart kid, a keyboard, a phone line, and a screen that looks friendly enough to be harmless. He thinks he found a game. The computer thinks it found an opponent. And once the system starts moving, the movie keeps reminding you how close the world can drift toward disaster without anyone touching a weapon. But beneath that quiet, dial-tone dread, the film was nearly something else entirely. It was built from two different ideas, reshaped, rewritten, and stitched together until the version we know finally clicked. Even the casting came together in unusual ways, and long after its release, the idea refused to disappear. It kept coming back in new forms, trying to match a new era. These are 10 weird facts about WarGames, the thriller that made pressing keys feel like pulling triggers. Stay until the end because this story didn't stay on screen, it reached into real life. Number 1. WarGames did not start as the movie people remember. In the beginning, it was built from two completely different concepts. Lawrence Lasker was deeply affected by a television documentary about Stephen Hawking. What stayed with him was the image of a brilliant mind trapped in a failing body, racing against time to pass something important on before it disappeared. That became one version of the story, an older genius trying to leave a final legacy. At the same time, Walter Parks was imagining a completely different kind of genius, not older, but younger, a teenager. Brilliant, restless, and easy for adults to underestimate, someone whose intelligence might be ignored until it was too late. Those two ideas merged into an early script called The Genius. Even then, you could feel the shape forming, one genius built on knowledge, the other on instinct. One nearing the end, the other just beginning. But everything changed once they began researching computers. With help from the Stanford Research Institute, they explored emerging computer culture, and that's when the balance shifted. The younger character started to dominate the story. The older genius was still compelling, but the idea of a teenager with access to systems he didn't fully understand felt far more dangerous. A kid with a modem and curiosity could wander into places he had no business being. That realization transformed the film. It stopped being about genius and started being about a mistake. The older storyline faded into the background while the teenage hacker became the core. And once that shift happened, the project stopped being The Genius, it became WarGames. Not a single perfect idea from the beginning, but two different stories colliding until the more dangerous one took over. Number 2. Even after WarGames found its identity, getting it made was still difficult. The problem wasn't the script, it was that Hollywood didn't know what to call it. In the early 1980s, a story about computers, military systems, phone lines, and a teenage hacker didn't fit into any clear category. Today, that sounds familiar. Back then, it didn't. Studios understood war films, they understood teen movies, they understood science fiction, but WarGames sat awkwardly between all of them. It had military stakes without a battlefield, it had technology but not in the futuristic, space-driven way studios associated with sci-fi, and it had a young lead, but the story wasn't a light coming-of-age film. That confusion made executives hesitant. Many leaned toward labeling it science fiction, but that label actually hurt the project. It made the story seem distant, speculative, almost like fantasy. The script was trying to do the opposite. It was grounded in reality, suggesting that this kind of danger was already possible. One connection, one system, one mistake at a time. Producer Leonard Goldberg carried the project from studio to studio, but the reaction was often the same: uncertainty. Universal showed interest, but only committed around $8 million, which wasn't enough to bring the story to life properly. The film needed scale. It required command centers, large systems, and a believable military environment. Without that, the threat wouldn't feel real. Then real-world events shifted everything. News surfaced that the U.S. military had briefly believed it was under attack due to a simulation error. Suddenly, the story didn't feel hypothetical, it felt immediate. The pitch changed overnight. WarGames was no longer a strange hybrid, it was a thriller about something that could actually happen. That shift unlocked the project. United Artists and MGM came on board, raising the budget to about $12 million. The film finally had the resources it needed. It almost failed simply because Hollywood hadn't yet learned how to categorize it. Once the funding arrived, the next challenge emerged: the director. Number 3. WarGames nearly became a very different film because of a major change behind the camera. The original director was Martin Brest. At first glance, that might sound like a minor production detail, but it wasn't. Once filming began, it quickly became clear that Brest was making a different version of the movie than everyone else expected. And for a story like WarGames, tone is everything. The film needs to start small and gradually escalate. It begins with curiosity, a teenager exploring, experimenting, pushing boundaries. Then it slowly transforms into something dangerous. That progression is essential. Brest's approach shifted the tone too quickly. His version leaned darker from the start, more serious, less playful. The sense of teenage curiosity was reduced, replaced by a heavier, more immediate threat. That change disrupted the entire structure. David stopped feeling like a kid who stumbled into danger and started feeling like he belonged in a much colder story. The issue escalated from creative differences into a full production crisis. Brest pushed for rewrites, while writers Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parkes felt the film drifting away from its core identity. This wasn't just a stylistic disagreement. The film itself was changing mid-production. The studio made a drastic decision. About 2 weeks into filming, Brest was removed. Director changes usually happen before shooting begins. WarGames had to make that call while the movie was already in motion. It was a risky move, but it ultimately saved the film's direction and tone. Number 4. When Brest left, the production wasn't stable, it was already struggling. The tone was inconsistent and uncertainty hung over the set. The young leads, Matthew Broderick and Ali Shady, weren't even sure what would happen next. Brest reportedly reassured them they wouldn't be fired too, which shows how tense the situation had become. Then John Bottoms stepped in, and he wasn't inheriting a smooth production. He was stepping into something that needed immediate correction. One of his first decisions was to bring the writers back. Lasker and Parkes had been sidelined during the earlier conflict, and Bottom restored them because the film had drifted too far from its original vision. That alone was a major reset. But the most important change was tone. Bottom recognized that the film was taking itself too seriously too early. If the story starts heavy, there's nowhere for it to build. WarGames only works if it begins with lightness, curiosity, humor, a sense of teenage experimentation. The audience needs to see David as a kid before they can feel the danger of what he's done. Bottom adjusted the performances, allowing Broderick and Shady to feel more natural, more playful, more believable as teenagers. That shift gave the film room to grow. Now the tension could build gradually instead of arriving all at once. His direction didn't just fix the movie, it restored its identity. Number 5. Once the tone was corrected, the next step was making David feel real. He couldn't come across as a traditional movie hero. He needed to feel like a believable teenager, smart, confident, but also careless. Matthew Broderick fit that role perfectly, even though his path to the part was unconventional. Instead of going through a standard screen test, he submitted videotaped scenes from another project. The producers saw enough in that footage to cast him immediately. That says a lot about what they were looking for. The character was already there in him. The production then built around that foundation. To make the arcade environment believable, full-size machines were placed in his home so he could practice. He spent weeks immersing himself in that world, learning the physical behavior, the focus, and the casual confidence needed to sell it on screen. And it worked. He moved like someone who had grown up around machines. The irony is that despite the film's focus on hacking and speed, Broderick reportedly wasn't a fast typist. The production had to compensate with camera tricks and editing to maintain the illusion. In the end, the casting wasn't about technical accuracy, it was about capturing the right personality and building everything else around it. Number 6. Jennifer Parker wasn't originally meant to be as important as she became. Early versions of the script treated her as a secondary character, someone reacting to events rather than shaping them. In a story driven by technology and escalating danger, that kind of role can easily fade into the background. But Ali Shady changed that. She brought energy, intelligence, and a sharper presence to the role. When she and Broderick worked together, their chemistry stood out immediately. Their scenes had more life, more balance. The production recognized that and expanded her role. Jennifer evolved into a true partner in the story. She questions David, challenges him, and often recognizes the danger before he does. That shift strengthened the narrative. Instead of following a single perspective, the film gained a dynamic relationship. Without her, it's a story about one kid and a system. With her, it becomes a shared experience, grounded in how real teenagers might react under pressure. Number 7. One of the most surprising casting possibilities involved the role of Dr. Stephen Falcon. At one point, John Lennon was considered for the part. That would have changed the entire tone of the film's final act. Falcon isn't just another character, he represents the consequences of the system, the person who understands what was created and what it means. Lennon's presence would have added a different kind of weight, something more iconic and unexpected. But his death in 1980 ended that possibility before it could develop further. The role eventually went to John Wood, and that casting proved crucial. Wood didn't bring celebrity energy, he brought quiet authority and exhaustion. His performance gave Falcon a sense of regret, someone who had lived with the consequences of his own work. That grounded the ending in a way that felt more personal and reflective. Number 8. The computer system Joshua became one of the most memorable elements of the film, but it almost remained silent. Early discussions questioned whether the machine should have a voice at all. A speaking computer could easily feel artificial or distracting. One idea was to keep its communication entirely text-based. That approach might have been safer, but it would have reduced the presence of the system. Giving Joshua a voice made it feel active, aware, almost human. The decision became even more effective when John Wood provided the voice, linking the machine directly to its creator. The performance added subtle unease. It sounded calm, but slightly unnatural. The result was a character that felt both intelligent and unsettling, reinforcing the film's central tension. Number 9. The production invested heavily in creating a believable war room. This wasn't a small set enhanced later, it was a massive environment built on a large soundstage. The scale mattered. The room had to convey the seriousness of the situation instantly. Rows of monitors, layered workstations, and constant activity made it feel alive. The technology wasn't just decorative. The displays were functional during filming, using real systems to generate visuals. This added authenticity and depth. The set reportedly cost around $1 million, making it one of the most expensive built at the time. It succeeded in making the stakes feel real, not theoretical. Number 10. WarGames had an impact beyond entertainment. After watching the film, President Ronald Reagan reportedly questioned whether its scenario could happen in real life. That question led to discussions about computer security at the national level. The idea that a system could be accessed accidentally and trigger serious consequences wasn't dismissed, it was taken seriously. The film contributed to early awareness of cybersecurity risks, showing how fiction can influence real-world thinking. Bonus fact: despite its strong concept, WarGames never fully returned as a major franchise. Attempts to revive it, including a sequel and later projects, never reached the same impact. The idea remained relevant, but the original sense of discovery and tension was difficult to recreate. The legacy of the film lies in its ability to turn curiosity into fear and make technology feel both fascinating and dangerous.